Hey guys, it's a perfect day. I'm downtown Vancouver at Voltbike's headquarters. It's actually just over yonder. They've got a shipping facility here and one in Washington State in the United States. And this is their new Elegant model. And I'm very impressed. I mean, it's definitely stripped down because they need to hit that low price point, $12.99. One of the more affordable, but still relatively high quality in terms of just the frame design. It has suspension. It's got a Bafang motor with a Samsung battery pack. You know, you're getting what I consider to be a pretty decent setup. And it weighs about 55.5 pounds, so it's not terrible. That weight's distributed fairly evenly. 7-pound battery pack. It is removable. There's just a lot of little, like the things I care about. It kind of ticks the boxes, and it comes in two different colors. So we've got the matte black right here. It also comes in white. Only one frame size, and it's about 19 inches. That's the seat tube measurement. I have the saddle way up high because I have longer legs and I want to get full leg extension when we do the test ride. But you can drop that saddle down, and then if you look at that low step design, it's pretty easy to get your foot up and over that. And that's important, especially if you have like bags, panniers or something back there, maybe a basket. You don't have to swing your leg up and around. So for me, this is a great, like, get around town. Maybe you're using it and you're a student, or you're someone who's a little bit older and you want a relaxed body position and a little bit of help with those hills. This does have ergonomic grips. They are cheap. They're very basic. They do not lock. They're just big black rubber things, you know, and by locking, I mean they don't have a little screw tightener, so they could spin a little bit over time, but it hasn't really been a problem for me right now. It does have an adjustable angle stem, and to me that's a big deal because some people want a more upright, relaxed ride position and others want to put it forward. Or let's say you're a taller person, you raise that saddle and you feel squished if the handlebars are really upright, you can put it forward. So that's a nice little bonus. You do want to keep an eye on it. It's a bit annoying because you have to pivot the display panel forward in order to unlock that and actually make the adjustment, so just be careful. You know, it gets a little crowded, but it works. You really don't need any tools, just a little bit of arm strength to get that thing going. And then of course the suspension fork, also very cheap, SR Suntour XCT, but with no compression adjust, no rebound adjust, just preload. And there's individual tightener at the top of each stanchion, so you have to adjust those, kind of sync them up, and that's something, you know, again, cheap. If you're someone who's a little bit heavier, you might feel the bike bobbing a little bit and diving as you brake, but at least it has suspension. And then down here to the Kenda Small Block 8, these are 26 by 2.1, so 2.1, that's the diameter here, and it's nice. They're a little bit fatter, squishier, and they've got this tread that's going to buzz a little bit on hard surfaces, but it gives you some traction if you have to cut across the path on your way to a park or something like that. And then the PSI range, it says 30 to 80. That's a huge range. So you can pump it up if you're someone who's a little bit heavier, or if you want that rolling efficiency because it's going to be harder, it's just going to coast longer. Or you can lower it down if you're someone like me. I'm only 135 pounds. I don't want it like super hard. I want comfort. But I also don't want to get a pinch flat. So if you lower it too much and you're someone who weighs a bit more, maybe you've got the rack loaded up, especially on the rear wheel, the tire can start to squish, and you can actually bang the rim. It can squish all the way through and start to squish that tube. So keep that in mind. I'm giving you a little bit of bicycle basics here on the fly, but that's something I think about. And 26-inch wheels, that lowers the whole bike a little bit. So of course there's 20-inch, you see those on folding bikes, and there's 24, and that's kind of like a kid's bike size sometimes, or like a hybrid thing. 26, very standard. This is like what every bike used to have. And now we see 27.5, and then there's the 700C, that's the 28-inch wider road bike wheel size, and now 29ers as well. And then there's fat bike tires and stuff. This is the most like common and kind of traditional size, and these tires are kind of basic. Kenda Small Block 8, they don't have any reflective sidewall stripes, they don't have any extra puncture protection, and that's one of the other areas that they're saving money on. So we've talked about the fork, we've talked about the grips, even just the brake levers, 5-star. I do like these. I don't want to complain too much. They have a rubberized edge, so they feel a little bit comfortable, but they are mechanical. Okay, so over time, it requires more hand strength. You're not going to be able to adjust those and bring the levers in. you know, you can lock them up just the same as you could a hydraulic. It's just going to require, you know, and potentially give you a little bit more hand fatigue over time. That's why these have 4-finger levers, so you can really get a hold of that, versus some mountain bikes have 2-finger levers, and a lot of them now have 3 if they're hydraulic. So that's one of the trade-offs. 160 millimeter rotors, front and rear. That's fine for around town, but some of the higher end bikes now have like 180 up front because a lot of stopping power happens up there. 160 in the rear, or 2 180s. Not a huge deal. Some people like mechanical because they feel like, oh, I can just adjust that myself with a little toolkit. Yeah, that's true, but hydraulic are getting a lot easier to adjust as well. And I want to be fair about some of the trade-offs. Also, you'll notice there's no quick release up front. Most of the time I see a 9mm skewer with like a quick release, and that's so that you can easily take off the front wheel, make the bike lighter, maybe put it in the trunk of your car or something. Same with the battery pack. 7 pounds, if you took that off and you took the front wheel off and you took all your luggage off, the bike becomes a lot more portable. In this case, it's not terrible that this just has standard nuts. You know, if we take off the cap, there's just a nut there and you have to use some tools to get it off. 10mm axle. It just requires a little bit more elbow grease. And in some ways that's good, because if you park this outside and you're in a place where people could tamper with it, they need tools to get the wheel off. They can't just take it off as easily. 36 spokes, 13 gauge, a little bit thicker. So built to be, you know, pretty strong. Double wall rims, but sort of cheap or generic. Samson, Champion, you know, aluminum alloy, double wall. They don't have reinforcement eyelets, but I still think they're probably fine, especially for the application of just getting around town. And I like that the spokes are a little bit thicker. Plastic fenders, generic, but they do have these mud flaps. This is probably going to buzz, you know, depending on the terrain you're on. They are adjustable here without tools, but I've heard some shops say like, you know, you're constantly adjusting them. Since the tires are a little bit fatter, there's not a whole lot of room between the tire and that fender. So you just, it's kind of a plus and minus. I like to have fenders, especially in a place like Vancouver. It's so green around here because it rains a lot, and that's going to keep you dry. But you're also going to hear buzz, 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 as you're cruising around town. And I'll try to let you be the judge. We'll ride around later, and I'll try to hit some bumpy terrain or off-road. And then this rear fender, see, it's way off the tire. So this one might not drag as much and buzz because the tire's colliding with it. But it also only has, you know, 1, 2, 3 supports, whereas a lot of the higher end ones, they'll connect down here by the bottom bracket. They'll connect here on the seat stays, and then up here at the rack a lot of times, and maybe they'll have 2 support arms, whereas this one just has 1. So you can, you know, see that thing bouncing around. It's not making a lot of noise right now, but over time it could just get a little bit looser. But again, it has fenders. I like that it has a steel derailleur guard, because this is a cheaper derailleur. Tourney, it's like the base level on the Shimano lineup. 7 speeds, not too bad. I think it's 14 to 28 tooth. It's great that you have some choices, but this derailleur it's just maybe not going to be as responsive or as lightweight, and it might go out of tune a little bit earlier than some of the higher end ones. There is a finger adjust though right here, so you can get in and kind of dial that in if you need to on the fly. And then there's these different adjusters here. I am not a bike mechanic, so I'm just sort of telling you the levels and giving you some input. They try to make their stuff good. I mean, Shimano has a good reputation, but you get what you pay for in some ways too. And then you can see a disconnect here. That's the power cable for the motor, and it comes in on the right side. So you see how crowded it is over here? There's like the shifter cable, the power cable for the motor, the derailleur, and if the bike tips or if something hits the side of the bike here, you could damage this. And so I love that they've thought about that. They've put a derailleur guard, and that might even help in the shipping process because it comes in this big box, and I want to show you that now. So this is what the Voltbike Elegant looks like outside of the box, but here's the box, just to get kind of a walk around, a sense for how you might lift it and carry it around. The charger, about 1.1 pounds, 2 amps. You know, there are chargers now that are like 3 amps or even 4 amps. They tend to be a little bit heavier and come with the more expensive bike. So considering this is, you know, around that 500 watt hour, this is kind of fine, sort of normal is what I would say. And then when you get a bike from Voltbike, they give you a DOT approved helmet, little visor and buckle. I think that's kind of neat. You know, I'm always talking about safety, so yeah. Unpacking it is really just a matter of, you know, turning the handlebars, maybe putting on the front wheel. There is a quick release for the seat tube, And that's one area that I would just keep an eye on, especially if you replace that with like a Thud Buster or a Body Float, something a little bit nicer for that added comfort, because someone could just swipe it. 27.2 millimeter diameter on that. So yeah, hopefully you get the bike and it's in great shape. And they charge $70 for shipping in the US, and I think it's a little bit lower. Maybe it's like $50 in Canada. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about the price. I mean, $12.99 is still a really good price. Volt Bike offers like a 1 year, maybe kind of a limited warranty. They have a decent reputation. People buy their stuff. Seems like it worked. They actually shipped me some bikes in Mexico to demo on the beach with their fat bike, and that was cool. So I have this long relationship with the founder, George. You know, he's trying to bring an affordable bike that checks a lot of boxes for utility. But, you know, again, you have to make compromises to do that. I love that in addition to fenders, we've also got a plastic chain cover with a bit of a reflective, I don't know if that's a sticker or it's kind of built in. It seems pretty cool. So as you're riding, if you have a dress on or if you have pants or whatever, and they slough up against this, they aren't going to get snagged or dirty by coming into contact with that chain. And man, look how loose that is. I'm used to mountain bikes where the chain is a lot tighter because they don't want it to slap or to flop off. And in this case, there is no slap guard on that right chainstay. You might not notice because you've got a chain cover, but that chain on the top is probably going to bang into this over time, create little chips or marks. That's an area that it's minor, but to me it's like it's a little bit of a detail that maybe they just glazed over. And then if we look back here, you can see those silver dots. That's a 12 magnet cadence sensor. So that's how the bike knows when you're pedaling whether to turn the motor on or off. 12 magnets is good. There are a lot of older bikes that are only 5 or 6 magnets, so there's higher definition, it's going to be more responsive. But cadence sensors aren't as fluid or natural feeling as like torque sensors or multi-sensors. Those tend to be more expensive and complex though, so for me this is perfect for this kind of bike. It's cheap, gets the job done, and they've dialed in the motor so that the controller isn't just like brr, brr. It's not like quite as startling or abrupt. It's a little bit smoother. So for people who want to feel like they're getting tons of power and zipping on down the road, this is not going to give them quite that much that feeling, but it still gets the job done. It's a 500 watt nominally rated motor. It's a 48 volt battery system, and the battery capacity is 10.5 amp hours or 10.4. So, you know, almost 500 watt hours combined with that 48 volt. That's a little bit more efficient in sending and receiving energy. I don't know what the amperage is, but a 500 watt geared hub motor, you know, geared means that the motor gets a little bit of a mechanical advantage as there's a littler motor inside and it spins these planetary gears, and you end up with a little bit more noise, but a smaller and lighter weight motor that's still pretty powerful. This is perfect, again, for this type of bike. It's great. Black kind of blends in. You'll notice the spokes are silver, so they aren't going quite as fancy as some of the other companies that use a similar setup. I think it's fine, and Bafang is a trusted brand. So yeah, just spreading out that weight, battery low, center up front, a little bit of weight back here. I think this is only like 5.5 pounds or something. The motor's not super heavy versus like 8 pounds for some of the bigger gearless designs. I don't know, just kind of thinking out loud here with you guys. And you can see that the cables are run a little bit exposed down here, and there's no chain guide, so the chain could still bounce off especially if you're using throttle and it's just bouncing and then you pedal for a second. I've dropped chains a lot, not on this bike, but on other bikes that don't have a chain guide. Yeah, and then it's really difficult to get it back on because there's this cover in the way. So I don't mean to be like a fearmonger here. I'm just thinking out loud. If you're on bumpy terrain, maybe shifting to a lower gear, I don't know. And then the cabling over here, so you see the brake line, and then this other little wire that goes to the rear light. I love that this has lights. They are very generic, so you can see there's no labeling or anything, and it's just got a couple LEDs and a reflector. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the bike on by pressing this power button, and then to activate the lights, I'll hold the plus button for a couple seconds. So the display, that's backlit. Got our rear light. Looks like maybe just one LED right on the top. Not super bright, but at least it's out of the way if you put a kind of a trunk bag, and if you put a pannier or a bungee cord that can connect right here and secure your stuff. So yeah, it's neat. It says max load 25 kilograms. That's approximately 55 pounds. So there's a decent capacity here, and it's positioned fairly far back. So if you needed to drop that saddle all the way down because you were maybe had a shorter inseam, you could do that, and you still have room back here to hang your bags or whatever, and that light isn't going to get blocked. Some of the older bikes, they have a light right here on the seat post, and then it would be completely blocked if you put a bag. And now here's the front light. Also, it's branded Blaze Light, but this has got to be one of their lower end lights because there's not even a model number. It does point where you steer because it's on that suspension fork. It is aimable up and down, but you can imagine if it was mounted on the bar or at the top, at the crown of the suspension, it wouldn't bounce as much. Where here, it's on the lower portion where that slides up and down as you're going over bumps. So that light's going to be like moving around and taking more abuse and maybe kind of creating a little bit more of a flash effect if you're on rough terrain than if it was up on the bike. It also creates a bit more unsprung weight. I mean, I'm really nitpicking here. It's not a huge deal. I love that it has a light at all, but it's not perfectly optimal. I like that the battery pack has a USB charging port on the side, full size. You could connect to that and run up your phone maybe, or a music player, or run some holiday lights across your bike like people like to do. I think that's great. However, it's kind of there where you step over the bike or you pedal. It's not really in the way, but they do sell little adapters, like 90-degree angle adapters on Amazon and probably other places online that you can plug in, and then it helps you to route your cables away, because otherwise USBs plug in and they stick out a little bit. So that's another thing that I love, but that it takes a little bit of compromise. 170 millimeter crank arms, aluminum alloy. I believe this is 38 tooth chainring up here. I found that even though the founder, I'm just talking to him a minute ago, George, I was like, what's the top speed? He's like, oh, you can go to like 25. Not really. The throttle gets you to 20 miles per hour. I was able to get like 21 pedaling. I was in the highest gear. Yeah, see, I'm in the highest gear right there. I was pedaling super fast, and that was to hit 21. So yeah, maybe there's some cutoff or something that you can adjust, and I'll show you the settings in a minute. But this is really a 20 mile per hour class 2 electric bike, which is what it kind of should be in my opinion. It's the most legal. You do have a throttle for those people who need some assistance, and it does work to override those different levels of assist. There are actually 9 levels of assist, so it can be a bit tedious as you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But at any time, if you need extra power, the throttle gives you full power at any time, and that's awesome, except for if you're in 0. So if we go all the way back down, 0, everything is just kind of turned off. At least in this setting, you might be able to adjust that. There's like a password kind of thing you can type in. I don't really know about that for this bike, but I've seen this display before. It's Intelligent is who makes this. Got a little flick bell there to signal some riders. It's also kind of cheap. It looks nice and it sounds good right now, but careful with it, because if it gets bumped, I've seen those break pretty easily. And then you do not have to leave the keys in the battery pack. I have it in because I wanted to show you how this works. So you twist it, pull out on this lever. There we go. Just comes right out. Again, 7 pounds, not too bad. It does have a little battery indicator on top as well. So those 4 dots, you could see how full it is on the fly. And I think you can even use the USB port. So this is like a backup power bank. And that lever doubles as a handle. So you really don't want to drop your battery. It's the most expensive and probably one of the more delicate parts of the bike. Just set it in there like that. Listen for the click. There we go. Take out the keys. Yep, that's good. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of rattle. Maybe a little bit of play. So yeah, I think it's overall pretty good. 1.1 on that steering column. So I don't know if it's sealed cartridge or not. Some of the cheaper bikes, they don't go sealed cartridge, and then you get water in there and it can squeak a little bit more. I noticed that it's squared tapered bottom bracket, so there's a square in there versus splines with lots of ridges that give you just a sturdier build, and you see that on mountain bikes. So square taper is kind of what I would expect, but again, that makes me wonder about the bearings. Like, are they sealed? Is it gonna wear out a little bit more and squeak? Yeah, I don't know. Overall, I've become more detailed when I'm looking at these bikes, because I've seen almost this exact frame used by other companies that have much higher end parts, a higher end fork, a better derailleur, better shifters. This gets the job done, but you know, it's just, I don't know, it's not as pleasant to use, it's not as precise and quick. However, if you're wearing gloves, it's reachable. Again, the brakes, same thing, you have to use more effort. It's just a little bit less refined is all. So let's turn on the display panel, press that power button. On the top, we've got different speed readouts, and if you press the power button, it cycles through. So we go from current speed to average speed or max speed. And then on the bottom, it says trip meter, odometer, and timer. So that power button gives you all those different readouts. And then if you double tap it, now we're into the settings. So I can change it to miles per hour from kilometers. I can cycle through and go backlight, how bright do I want it, all that kind of stuff. And then there's this password area here, these like 4 digits, and that's where you can maybe dial down or up the speed depending on your needs. There are definitely people out there that just want to go to the craft fair and ride around, and maybe you're a little bit older, you don't want to get going too fast. And I think this is one of the bikes where you can turn the speed down a little bit, and they include instructions and stuff, and that the box and everything that we looked at. So I feel like it's, again, I came into this pretty excited, like, wow, that's a low price. That could get people onto a bike. And you know, I've looked at other bikes like the Saunders in the past, the original. It was like 1 gear, you know. I'd much rather have 7. I love that he's thinking about protecting those parts, even if they are more basic. Yeah, you might have some rattling, but you know, at least you stay dry. You got lights, they're wired in, but you know, yeah, that wire is exposed. This bike might wear out a little bit faster or be a little bit more vulnerable in different ways, but it works. It gets the job done, and I want to praise them for that. So here we go, kind of angle the display. I think I'm gonna hop on this thing and ride up this hill. I don't know how it looks to you, but there's definitely a hill here, and I was impressed. The motor did well, even from standstill. It was helping me up. Again, I do not weigh that much, so take this with a grain of salt. And I love that they have an adjustable length kickstand and that it's rear mounted. So see how it stays out of the way? You can lube the chain or do work on this. You can even back it out of your garage. So a lot of times I'll grab a bike and I just start walking it backwards, even though the kickstand's down, and nothing happens in this case. It doesn't collide with that crank arm. So kudos to them. This is pretty well designed. I'm in pedal assist level 1. That's not going to give me a ton of power if I was using pedal assist, but it'll give me all the power I need with the throttle. There we go, climbing the hill. Wow, be impressed. Like, that is awesome. I came up that hill almost from standstill. I did kick off a little bit, but I don't think I even needed to. We were way down there. One-handed, using the throttle. You could probably hear the fenders like I talked about before, but I'm impressed. Whoa, boy, getting a little bit hung up. I think overall it's great. Now I'm going to go to kind of a mid-level, like 5 on assist, and I'll start and stop pedaling and you can see how it responds. I'm in a hard gear, so I'm pedaling kind of slow. Not bad. Actually, quite good, considering how slow I was pedaling. I'm just falling over all over the place today to get back on the sidewalk. And these are those moments where it's like I haven't shifted down, I need to get going. Just hit that throttle. Awesome. Gets you up to speed pretty quick. I mean, that's like 15 miles per hour right there. Okay guys, the goal with this shot is to show you some gear shifting, to let you listen as I pedal for that cadence sensor to tell the motor to start and stop, and also to let you see the fender and the rack and everything. You know, it feels pretty solid. Of course, if you had bags and stuff, it would maybe rattle a little bit more, but this is a good chance to see how a brand new bike would sound kind of right out of the box. And I will go over some grass and stuff too. From here, you should be able to see the suspension in action and get a view of that front fender. Everything worked out pretty well. You know, the brakes stopped me, and on the smooth like pavement, the rattling completely stopped. Of course, when you're on the grass and stuff, that's a really good simulator for a bumpy sort of pothole type of street. Pretty comfortable, upright. The suspension fork working up there. Guys, I've had a lot of fun checking this out, and I feel much more informed than, you know, years ago. The last time I was here in Vancouver checking out the Volt bikes, I was just excited about kind of what they offered, and I wasn't thinking so much about the quality level and the trade-offs. It's wonderful to have different choices in the space. I know people have different budgets, and I feel like Voltbike does a really good job for that like lower price point. So anyway, for the full write-up on this, including standover, reach, width, length, all the things you might want to know, I'll see you back at electricbikereview.com. Of course, have fun out there, wear that helmet, ride safe.